What's up, my dudes? We already back to back on MX Bikes gameplay again, bro. Oh, man. Is Spency Boy gonna really, finally, for once and for all, start getting into this shit? I don't know. I couldn't tell you. I don't know, man. Sometimes I'm like, I really get that itch to play MX Bikes, and I'm like, I just almost start to really play it, right? But for whatever reason, something's kind of always pulled me back away from it before I ever really sunk my teeth down into it, right? But I don't know, man. We'll just have to see how much I get into it in the future. But I am a really big fan of all the different custom tracks and how many different custom tracks there is for MX bikes. And now you're kind of starting to get that variation between different kind of track makers and different kind of scaling and different kind of difficulty and different kind of tractions, you know. So this is the ClubMX Pro track made by Dismal Bree. Okay, that's the track we're reviewing in this video. So the first thing you're obviously going to think to yourself when you see this track is, you know, what in the dog water is that? That looks like trash graphically. What is that, right? It almost looks like a early day, like MX simulator graphical style custom track or something. But I still think it's cool to come in here and check out all the different tracks. And, you know, a track can have a certain look to it, or a certain, like, maybe not as advanced of graphical touches and objects and decals, and you know, it may not quite be to that next level visually, but it can still ride really good and still be fun. You know, there is a plethora of different tracks like that on MX Sim where it, you know, it's like some basic off track or some, you know, just standard tree object, like 69,000 of those perfectly spaced apart on the off track, and that's all there is. You know, but the track can still be really fun. There's a difference in that terrain and visual, like decals and skyboxes and objects. There's a difference in the terrain and that, right? So, but this is, I guess, replicating some sort of, you know, ClubMX Pro track. I guess the most modern version of it. I don't really know. I've watched a couple of helmet cam videos of stuff at ClubMX, but I haven't really, like, super paid attention to it, so I couldn't tell you how accurate this track is to the real life one or anything like that, but I'm just reviewing the track sort of as is. It's a very sandy track, deep kind of sand. Some of it's more loam where it's not quite as deep. I would say, like, there's like probably like 1/4 of the track is like super deep sand, and then, you know, 3/4 of the track is like a not quite as deep of a sand. It's not going to rob your power quite as much. There is kind of like a supercrossy sort of double style, but they're pretty big doubles. There's kind of a section like that. There's a couple of bigger whip jumps on the track, but it is definitely a, you know, hold the gas down, hit that outside berm, you know what I mean, carry your speed around. Just a couple of spots where the track gets almost too tight to carry that speed, but most of the track you can just carry it all the way around. You know what I mean? The finish line, you can actually, I mean, I think it's the finish line. Pretty sure it's the finish line. I don't know. You come across, like, by the start straight, and you jump over this probably like 75-foot tabletop, and then you come around a right-hander, and then it's probably like a 100-foot if you want to triple it all the way over, or you can just double over it, but it's still a pretty fun, bigger style jump that you can really whip on, and if you over jump it, you're going to pop off. So there is some jump skill gap. I do think there is some parts of this track that obviously get basic, even on the on track, you know, obviously. But the off track, yeah, there's just not a whole lot to it. You know, it's very, very basic object placement and decal work on the track, you know, pretty basic stuff here. But, you know, like overall, I'll probably give this track like a 4 or something like that, you know, 4 or 5, because you have to rate everything. You know, you got to rate the visual look of it, the biome, the design, how unique is it, you know, and then the track and the difficulty and the skill gap and how natural does the track feel and all those kind of things. I think there's some spots on this track that just, especially some spots in the deeper sand where you're just wide ass open. I mean, wide ass open on that 450. And there's just not much going on. You know, it almost gets in that syndrome like when you're on the trail tracks on Legends, where you're just wide open and nothing's really happening. The bike's not really bouncing anywhere. You're not hitting anything really. Some of the deeper sand sections kind of get like that on this track, where you're just sitting there with your eyes closed, wide open on the throttle. Nothing's gonna happen to the bike. You're just gonna kind of angle the bike to where it goes around the layout of the track. You know what I mean? It's like, because you can't pick up enough speed because the sand is too deep. It's got too much friction to it. So, in the way the track is built and the way MX bikes' physics are, especially when you're going up any sort of uphill or anything like that at a slower speed, it's just going to rob every bit of that momentum, every bit of that power. So you can only keep so much momentum up in these deeper sand sections, and it's not very much. You know what I'm saying? No matter how hard you try to hit it, no matter how much you try to stay on that gas, there's only so much you can do with the way the traction is on this custom track specifically. I think it gets a lot better and a lot more skill gapped when it's not in the lighter colored, deeper sand, but when you go to more of the grayer toned, like loamy looking dirt on this track, or sand mix or whatever. That's the part where the track gets a little more interesting. It does kind of have the basic standard, just one inside berm, one outside berm. They're not even really ruts. So it's kind of like you're, you know, kind of a really old school way to make pre-made on custom tracks. But I don't think this person's made a shitload of tracks, so it's not like, you know, oh my gosh, I expect this to be like 10 out of 10 or some shit. But one thing I will say to the track maker, you definitely want to make sure you smooth off some of these jagged edges around some of the terrain on this track, and not even for the sense of to make it look better or whatever, even though that is a benefit to it, but you want to make sure and smooth off those super like degenerated, you know, triangles that you get on the terrain whenever you don't smooth it out and it just gets jagged. You want to smooth that out because it will actually help the performance of the track when you're on it. That's how MX Simulator is. If you have too much jagged terrain, that will literally cause lag in that specific area on that custom track. And I did feel a little bit of that going around this track, where it'll kind of give me that weird stutter lag when I get up to a certain spot of the track. So just future reference, you want to make sure you smooth those super jagged. I noticed a couple spots, especially close to the off track. It's like you kind of had it where it's built up a little bit, but you didn't go back in there and smooth it. You want to make sure you do that, man, because you want to try to get the maximum performance out of your custom track that you possibly can get. And from something I've learned from MX Sim, degenerated triangles are not something you want on a custom track, okay? But other than that, there is a couple cool places where you can over jump way down the hill, and the fact that it is more of a loamy sand, you can kind of get away with over jumping stuff a little bit more. Like I say, not as much like micro ruts or like super realistic pre-made ruts up the jump faces, or like roughness and kickers up the jump. There's not really much of that. It is more of that amateur-y style kind of track feel. You know, there's some places where you can hold the gas down and stuff, but overall, yeah, it's somewhere around that like 4 overall range. But it's not to say it's not fun to like hop on these kind of tracks and run some laps, you know, even if they're not the best kind of track or not the most perfect kind of track or whatever. I mean, I still think they're fun to come ride on, you know, and it brings me back to the days of like when you first get into track making and you're trying to find your way on track making and you're trying to figure out how to do it. It's cool to see that progression, you know? So by no stretch am I saying like, oh man, this is just so shitty or whatever. That's not even really it. It's just, you know, I just think certain elements of the track could have been made better and more like the kind of pre-made that you would see on like a MXGP replica track in this game. Maybe not quite as extreme as that, obviously, but, you know, more so of like the 3 or 4 ruts in the corner, especially on a sand track. You know, you're going to want some of the corners to have more of those micro ruts versus every single corner having basically the same 2 berms. It's pretty much what this track is, man. It's like same 2 berms, same size. It just flows around whatever kind of corner it's going into. So when you really think of that, the ruts and stuff in the corners are pretty basic in that sense. There's not a lot of variation to them. You know, and I think that's kind of part of the issue. I think some spots of the track could have been kind of extended, like some of the corners could have been extended in a way where you could keep your speed up just a little bit more, and it would have added, I feel like, just a little bit more skill gap to it. You know, some of it can get a little bit of that MX bike's narrowy to it. And then obviously there could have been a lot more work done graphically with the decals, and the traction could have been better too. I don't think it was terrible, but like I say, with the way the track works, if you're going to have deep sand, you know, it's going to have a little bit more to it if you want those deeper sand sections to have really any sort of skill gap to them at all. But they really don't. The super deep sand spots on this track I just don't think they fully live up to what you would think of as like a super deep Club MX sort of sand section or something like that, right? But yeah, just not a whole lot of flair or color or, you know, not a whole lot that's going to make this track like super stand out from anything else that's been made on MX bikes. It's just pretty generic, you know what I mean, at the end of the day. And I get, you know, it's trying to be like a Club MX replica, and there's not like a crazy amount of off-track stuff you could do, but it still could have been done with a lot more, you know, a lot more time put into it. A lot more, I don't know if this really gave me that full feeling like I was on a Club MX track. It gave me that feeling a little bit, but not to the fullest extent that it could have, you know what I mean? But either way, still a fun little track to hop on if you want to hit a couple whip jumps, mess around on some loamy style sand. Either way, man, that's the review. Appreciate you guys watching all the videos. I'll see you boys on that next one. Later, dudes.